All right, welcome back to this series on sculpting facial features in Blender. So we're going to be using this model here, which I put in the link in the description, which is just like a little section of a face that I sculpted to use as a reference. Okay, let's start. We're going to add not a cube. You might think it's a cube, but actually we're going to take a sphere. And I'm going to take a section of the sphere. I'm going to take basically this chunk of the sphere and use that since it already has a curvature, which we can use for the face, because the face has a curvature to it. Let's go into edit mode. I'm going to select this one, this one, this one. That's probably good because the rest of them are too curved. And I'm going to go to the side here, go to X-ray mode, which in my computer is Alt-X, but most people's is Alt-Z. And I'm going to select this subtract selector, and I have it on lasso, but you can have it on whatever, the rectangle. And I'm just going to deselect this part because I don't really want that. Great. Now that I have that, I'm just going to Control I, invert the selection, and just get rid of the rest of this sphere. And now I have this kind of puck thing. All right, now I'm going to press A for all and extrude this along the y-axis. And I know it turned red, but we'll deal with it in a second. Now that I did that, I'm going to flatten this whole curved part because I don't want it to be curved. So to do that, I go S, Y, 0. Scale it along the y-axis to 0, flat. And I'll push this forward a bit, GY. I don't need to be that thick. Okay, let's take care of the fact that all the normals have been flipped. Press A for everything, and I'll just go to Mesh and Normals, recalculate outside, because it flipped the normals when I extruded it. Okay, so let's go back to edit mode. Now I want to subdivide this. I'm actually going to remesh this whole thing. But for now, I want to just first subdivide it so I don't have these big squares to worry about. Now, if I just use a subdivision surface modifier, a regular one, we'll see what happens. It kind of smooths all of this and it makes this, and I kind of want to keep the top and the bottom flat. So what I can do is take this thing off for a second, and you may know this, but I'm going to add just quick supporting loops. Supporting loops will just keep the areas that I want to be crisp. So what I could do is I'll just go into edge mode and click this here, any of these edges, and do Control R and slide this thing basically pretty much completely forward. Control R here, do another edge loop, and slide this one completely back like that. And now you'll see when I turn this on, it keeps its shape. It just smooths out these, which is what I want it to do. I'll put two subdivision levels like that. And I will apply it. Apply. Let me just make sure that my scale is not been altered when I was doing all this. I'm going to press N. My scale is fine. If these numbers were not 111, I would do this. Control A, and I would set at least the scale. I would apply the scale. Okay, let's go into sculpt mode now. And I'm gonna, well actually first of all I have to stretch this out vertically because it's not quite big enough. So I'm gonna go back into edit mode, select everything, and just SZ, and just give myself a little bit more vertical room. And go back to sculpt mode here. And first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to remesh this whole thing. R, and I'm gonna choose about something like that, 0.03 or 0.04, and Control R. So please, kids, turn on X symmetry. I'll cut the sides off by doing this. Pick line project here. I'm going to take my line here, press F so the shaded side is on the proper side, and then chop it. Okay, let's start sculpting. So I'm going to carve down this section of the face. Basically, I'm going to keep this here. I'll show you with a mask just for a demonstration. This section here. Okay, what I'm going to do now is carve down the bottom part here under the brow. I will show you what I mean by this. Switch to a mask just for demonstration purposes. And basically, if this here is the brow ridge, and remember that on a man, the brow here is further forward than the cheekbones. So basically what I have to do is push everything else in a little bit. So I'll kind of mask off the brow area, and I'll press Shift, which smooths out this mask a little bit. See, like that. And then I'm going to take a really big inflate brush and go to the side and press Control. Whoops, that's not what I wanted to do. Then I'm going to take a really big inflate brush, I, and then press Control and basically push all of this in. So that I have basically a brow ridge. Now don't be afraid that if you do that, it's going to be, exposing that. It doesn't really matter. We're going to remesh it anyway. And I'm going to just basically keep doing that and pushing the brow, pushing everything but the brow in. Smoothing it a little bit. Now my smooth, by the way, as I press Shift, my smooth is set to a very low level, maybe 0.2, so that I don't just obliterate everything as I'm doing this. Okay, I'll go back, smooth it a little bit. Let me undo this mask, Alt-M. And you see I already have basically a brow ridge of some sort. I have space for the eyes to sit. And now I'm going to refine that a little bit. I'll actually go to a smaller inflate, and I will press Control again and really kind of dig into where the eye sockets are going to be, which is the skull area, or the eye sockets of the skull. And of course I'm going to put eyes in here, but for now I'm sort of carving in sort of the skull shape. Okay, now if I put it up like that, I see that the skull, if you look at your own forehead, this area here is not quite that rounded. It doesn't go back that much. So I'm pressing I and just inflating this a little bit, just the corners here, so that it's a little bit more flat, like a real skull would be. Okay, and now I'm going to go and make a nose, or at least part of a nose. But before I do that, since you see it's still very low poly, I'm going to actually just remesh it. R, I'm going to put it now to about 0.01, Control R, smooth it out a little bit, so that my nose won't just be so crunchy when I pull it out. All right, now I'm going to press M, and I'm going to paint on, whoops, there's a huge mask. M, I'm going to paint on the area where the nose is going to be. But really, it's not much of a nose. It's just a small little part of a nose. And I'm not doing anything there because I don't want this to be pulled out, right? This is going to be actually the depressed area. And I press Control to just make that mask a bit smaller. It's much too wide. And now I can, a little bit more. Now I can press Shift and blur the mask. I can do the same thing here. Now here's the fun part. Control I to invert the selection. So now I just have this stuff unmasked, and go to the Move tool. And I'll push this out like that. Now I'm pushing it out to sort of the extreme, sort of the point of the nose. And then I'll push everything else in. G, and I will push, and I'm smoothing it now. I'm going to push this part back in, so it's not sticking out to that degree. Now I'll go to the smooth brush, make it a little bit stronger because I'm kind of doing a basic shape here. And look at it from the front. Take off the mask. And I'll just use the grab brush, the move brush, or which is called the grab brush, to just push this in a little bit. And I'm really getting the basic skull shape here. I'm going to continue refining this a small amount because I see that this brow should be a little bit more back like that. So something about like that, let's say. And then I'll go again with the inflate tool, Control, and I'll just make a little bit of this area here where the frown lines would be. Even though this isn't like an old person or anything like that, I want to just have that slight impression of this plane change there. Okay, so let's say that that's okay for now. It's just sort of the basic skull shape. Now I'm going to add an eye. And I will have to go back afterwards and carve some of this back. But let's start off with figuring out the size of the eyes. So I'm going to go to object mode here. I'm going to go Control A and put a UV sphere. Now obviously this is 1,000 times too big. Go into edit mode just so I don't have to apply any of the transformations. And I'll do scale and scale this way down. And GY so that it goes in front of the eye, of the face. Now I don't really care how far in front it goes. I just need to be able to see it. RX90 so that this point is facing us because this is going to be the iris. And we'll continue to scale it down. All right, let's talk about the size of the eyes and the distance between the eyes. There's usually a 1 eyeball diameter distance between the two eyes. So let's say that this is an eye here, or just for kind of rough purposes, I'm going to try to kind of get this into approximately the right size, and then I'll show you what I mean by this. If I had this eye here and I just duplicated it over here for now, and then I had another eye and I duplicated it, it should be something like that. It should be about 3 eyes across. So this eye size that I just kind of made up seems okay. I'm going to just delete these two for now. Well, forever, in fact. Go back to this one. Now let's go to the side view, and I'm going to actually put it into the eye cavity. It's a little big, I can see right away. So I'm pushing it back here so that it is sitting in the right position. This is a bit tricky. Of course, that since I carved the eye out, you have no actual corneal bulge. It's flat. Really, the eye goes till about there because there's the cornea. And so I can see that my eye is pushed out too much. It's going to be a kind of a weird looking eye. So I'm going to go GY, and put it back a little bit more. So I have room for the eyelids that go over it. Now, of course, it looks weird now because I still have this skin over it. So what I'll do here is I'm going to go back and sculpt this now. Now that I have this kind of eyeball here temporarily, or as a placeholder, I can kind of go back to work on this face. So I'll show you a cool trick. This is now selected. If I hover over here and press Alt-Q, now that's selected. And since I'm going to be doing most of this in sculpting mode, I can keep switching between this and this if I want to. So now I'm actually able to sculpt this. So let me go back to my inflate brush. I'll put it pretty strong. I will press Control and, whoa, that was a bit too strong. And I will keep carving this back a little bit so I can reveal the eyeball that I just put. And first I just want to make sure that the eye is sitting properly in the skull. Okay, so I'm just kind of basically cutting out the skin there so it is kind of like a skull with an eye. Just to kind of assess, does this make sense? It's not too bad. It looks like it probably might be okay for now. We'll see. We'll be able to adjust it later. One other thing is, if I go back to this eye, I'll show you something kind of that you might not have thought about. Go back to edit mode with the eye. You see that the eye is facing directly in front, but in reality, this pupil has to be slightly the other way, to the other side. So the eyes will actually be a tiny little bit facing away from each other. RZ, just a tiny bit. That was too much. RZ, and I'll press Shift. I'll just move it a little bit that way. Now I'm going to mirror it. I'll just add the modifier. I don't think I did anything to the... Yeah, that's okay. And you see that even though they are straight ahead, I even need to rotate it a little bit more to that side. So RZ, hold Shift. See, something like that looks probably pretty good. That looks like it's staring forward, even though it's actually slightly apart. Now let's go back to our actual skull here, or our face here. And now that I see that it seems like it's pretty good in terms of the position, I'm going to now sculpt the flesh here around the eye. What I'm not going to do is I'm not going to actually sculpt eyelids yet, because the eyelids are going to be put on separately. So I'm basically ignoring all of these lids, and I'm just sculpting this stuff around here and this stuff around there. Basically, it's going to be an eye with no lids, and that's really what I'm doing. So I'm going to use a couple of different brushes for this. I'll show you one of them, which is called clay strips. If I click that, and I usually use clay strips on a very low level. I'll do it for now on a high level so you can see what I'm doing. High strength, I mean. It gives you literally strips of clay. But because they're flat, you kind of have this, it gives you this kind of way of building up forms in a kind of a planar way very easily, and you can kind of cross hatch it like that. See, I'm going in one direction, then I'm adding a little bit in the other direction, and then you can smooth. Now I want to have my smooth be quite low, so I put the strength to low, and I'll go back to my clay strips. I actually assigned the number 4 to my clay strips brush. So every time you see the number 4, it means I'm using my clay strips brush. So I'll put some more clay strips, and what I'm trying to do here is just building up the skin that hangs over the eye. It's not the lid. It's just the skin on, it's called the frontal bone area. And it's the skin that hangs over the eye, as you see here. And this is because, that first of all, the bone is right there. You actually have, if you put your finger right now on your skull, you feel that this is still part of the skull here. And usually there's some kind of a fat pad and flesh that hangs over. Now, the older you get, the more it hangs over. And so if you're quite old, you have this sort of fold that looks, something like that, where you can get the crow's feet, something like that. But this guy isn't old, it's just you still have this flesh hanging over. I'm also going to add flesh here because now it really looks like a kind of an empty skull. So I'll go back to my clay tubes, and I'm going to, just another useful thing when you're using a mouse, is if I click the stroke menu and I click stabilize stroke, this allows me to do this, to smooth out the stroke that I'm doing. Now I don't like it when it's all the way up there, so I put it sort of more like that. And it allows me to do sort of more smooth buildup. And it's kind of a subtle, smooth buildup that you can control quite well. It really is like sculpting with, I used to be a traditional sculptor. So it's kind of like putting on these small strips of clay and building up the form of what you're sculpting. And of course you could just use the draw brush, but I like that. I like the clay tubes brush. It's nice. It kind of makes me think that I'm actually sculpting clay. It acts like clay. So here we go. I'm using this clay strips brush. My smoothing is still too strong because I'm obliterating everything. And I'm basically building up the skin around the eye. Okay, and now here, where you're going to have the tear duct. So I'm also moving away a little bit of the skin there to give room for the tear duct. And I'll do the tear duct after. Okay, a couple things about eye anatomy. First of all, the inner corner of the eye here is usually lower vertically than the outer corner. Now you see I did it quite exaggerated here. This outer corner is probably too high. But what I mean is if I drew a straight line like this outer corner is higher up. It doesn't quite go at the same level as the tear duct. Now this depends on the person. Someone like Sylvester Stallone has those kind of very sad looking eyes, and that's because the outer edge is actually further down. It's lower, so he looks a little bit more kind of melancholy. I'm going to take off the stabilized stroke here, and I'm going to continue to use this clay brush just to build up a bit more here, because it was too high. Okay, and now another important thing about eyes is this plane change here. You notice that in your eyes, there is usually, if you have a top light, a shadow around here, because from the side, the eye goes, the fold goes out like that, and then it kind of curves back the other way for the cheekbone, leaving a shadow here. On some people, it's very extreme, the shadow, and some people it's more subtle. And when you put on makeup, eyeshadow, often you're putting it on this area. You're kind of ending it right there so that you kind of emphasize that shadow. So I always put some kind of a shadowed plane change there. Okay, I'm going to do a large brush, super low strength for the smoothing. I'm just kind of smoothing this a bit so it's not so lumpy. Okay, but you see what I mean by have that subtle plane change. And it can be much less subtle. In fact, I'm going to probably add some clay here to make the plane change more obvious. See what I mean? Like that. So now I have a more obvious plane change. I just did that by adding some clay on the bottom. Okay, so so far it's okay. I'm going to add a little bit more here, and then we're going to add the lower lids, or in fact, both the upper and lower eyelids. A couple things here. This is a bit too harsh, so I'm kind of smoothing that out a little bit, and I will add, again with my clay brush, I'm going to carve out a little definition for the bottom of the eyebrows. See, that's what I'm doing there. I'm just giving it, now it looks like Michael Keaton. He has those kind of evil-looking eyebrows, those sinister eyebrows. I'll go to the regular brush, actually, draw brush 1. I have the shortcut for 1. And low strength, and I'm going to do control. Oh, still much too strong. And I'm just going to sort of define here where the eyebrow is going to go. that. Now I'm going to make the eyebrows afterwards, but for now I just want to make sure that, you know, they will make sense when I put them there. Still a little bit Jack Nicholson-y, so I'm going to add a little bit there so the peak isn't quite that sinister. Okay, something maybe like that. And then I will draw the brow after. Okay, let's make some eyelids. All right, time to make some eyelids. So I have done many, many different versions of eyelids in my life. And the way that I'm going to show you now is I think it's the most effective way that is quite easy to do. So let's go back to object mode and let's do some naming before we do the eyelids. So I have this that says sphere. Well, it's not a sphere. It's going to be the eye sculpt or eye demo. This here is going to be the actual eye. And I'm going to do something which maybe you know how to do and maybe you don't. I'm going to add these to a collection. I select both of these things and I'm in the outliner menu, as you see my mouse is here. If I right click and I select new collection, then I have this little collection here. Since they're still highlighted, I take these and I shove these in the collection. Basically, I pull them into that word. And now, if I turn this on and off, both these objects are sort of grouped together. I'll call this eye demo. Why not? You can call it whatever you want, but I'm calling it eye demo. All right, so let's go back to this eye. I'm going to duplicate this. Control D. I'm going to pull it out, and I'm going to call this eye form, because it's going to be the form I use to actually make my eyelids. Okay, and one thing I will definitely do is I'm going to go into edit mode, and this is going to be the eyelid. So first thing I'll do is I'll actually move it forward on the y-axis, so it's in front of the eyes. There we go. Okay, let's go back to this thing here and select the whole thing. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to rotate this on the x-axis, and you'll see why in a second. Rx this way. And what I want to do is I want to find an edge loop like that. That is going to be the bottom of the eyelids. So I'll show you what I'm talking about. It's kind of probably hard to imagine right now, but imagine that yellow area is going to be the upper eyelid. And so I'm going to go and do solo mode by pressing backslash and maybe even select another one of these loops. Now I'm going to go to the side, and I'm going to sort of do what I did before. Alt X for me, but for you Alt Z to go into X-ray mode. And I already have this lasso selected, and I already have subtract selected. And I'm just going to select the back of this sphere because I don't want the whole sphere for my eyelids. I just want to have like sort of the front part. That. Okay, so now I have that. This is going to be the basis for my upper eyelid. So I'm going to duplicate it by doing Shift D, press Escape, press P to separate that selection. Go back into object mode, and the eye form, for now I'm going to kind of get rid of it, and I'm going to rename this upper lid. And I'm going to right click and shade it smooth. So let's just see what we have here. We have a basic eyelid, which looks kind of weird, but we're going to be working on that in a second. Okay, a couple of modifiers that we need to put on this. As we see right now, it's just a paper thin shell. That ain't going to do. So we need a couple things. First of all, we need to add a solidify modifier. That is going to give it a thickness. So look what happens. If I go here with the thickness and I increase the thickness, it becomes thicker. And if I go to solo mode, you see that I can make this thing like a thick eyelid. Well, I don't want it to be that thick, but I do want it to be thick enough that it's actually not going to have any gap. See, that's too thin. I want it to basically actually go into the eye a little bit, so I don't have to worry about it. So, okay, now I have enough thickness to make this, to have the eyelid contact the eye. And I want to add a bevel modifier. And actually, the bevel modifier, I'm going to put it on top of the solidify modifier so that I keep this kind of sharp edge. Now, I'm going to add a subdivision surface modifier. And this, I think I'm going to put it under the solidify modifier. Sorry, under the solidify modifier. Let's see what happens if we change the order of the modifiers. If I put the bevel modifier in front of the subdivision surface, no, it doesn't look good. If I put the solidify there, that actually probably looks the best, because I still want to have this plane, this sort of sharper plane under the lid. So let's stick with that. That's pretty decent. Okay. And I think I need to put this even more forward. So I'm going to click this, go into edit mode, select everything, and just do G, Z, G, Y, and just push it even more forward. Okay, let's actually sculpt this thing now. Now we can go to sculpt mode and really just use the grab brush here with a very large brush and just move it so that the eyelid is in the proper position. So let's talk about the proper position for a second. First of all, the high point of the eye is somewhere around where the iris is. Especially this person's looking forward, they're looking straight forward. So the eye should be most open somewhere where the iris would actually be, where the pupil would be. The other thing is, I said before that the outer corner of the eyelid should be more higher up than the inner corner, so he doesn't look too sad. And you can see that he does look a little bit sad there, so I'm going to pull this more down like that. And now this part here, it actually has to be pulled out a little bit so that it overlaps onto the skin. So I went to the top view and I kind of pulled it out like that, because this is going to end up being where the tear duct is. Okay. Notice my brush is really big. I'm just using it to kind of change the curvature of the piece of the eyelid. Okay, so now that I have something like that, the other thing is, notice I did not apply any modifiers yet. I'm doing that on purpose so that I'm really just dealing with this tiny little piece of geometry, this. That's what I'm dealing with. So that means I'm not actually, when I push it around, I'm not messing up this straight edge here. I'm just really just moving around that big layer of that hollow piece that represents the eyelid. Later on, I will apply them, but for now, it's much easier if I don't, because I can just move this around like there's some big low poly piece. Okay, let me go back and do my little Alt-Q, and then I can deal with this part of the sculpture and get this to kind of look okay. Whoops, that wasn't good. And now I can kind of go, and I'll just use the regular brush for now and do control a little bit. When I say regular brush, I mean the draw brush. And I'm going to carve out that tear duct. And this is all going to be joined together later. So this part here will be done after I join them. Okay, let's do the lower lid so we can have some idea what's going on here. Okay, we'll go back to our eye form. I'll put that back up. Take this, go to edit mode, and now I'm going to spin it in the opposite direction. Rotate X. And now I want to have the lower lid. So let's say that line will be the lower lid. So let me just kind of get this into the right position. I have to rotate it this way, so because it was kind of tweaked a little bit. Maybe something like that. And maybe a little bit more. Let's say something like that. And I will take these two loops, and I'll go into solo mode and just get a third one on the bottom so I have enough room. And then pretty much do exactly what I did before. Alt X, for you it's Alt Z to go into X-ray mode so I can get the back at the same time. And then I go into subtract, and then I go into lasso. The reason I'm using lasso is that way I can actually have this, because it's not a straight angle. So lasso allowed me to go at that, do that at that angle. Okay, great. So I have that piece. Shift D to duplicate it, escape, and then P to separate it. And I will go back to object mode and rename this lower lids. And I will shade smooth. And I will do the same cocktail that I did before. Add a subdivision surface, add a solidify, add a bevel. And let's see the order, and I have to change my solidify because I did it about like that before, something like that. And let me just confirm the order of the modifiers. Mirror, solidify, subdivision, bevel. Let's try this. Mirror, solidify, subdivision, bevel. Let's see if I switch that. Better. Better to have the solidify after the subdivision. So let's switch it on the other one too. Yo, that's much better. I know it looks very harsh now, but that is exactly what I want. I want a hard edge on the upper part of the lid, or on the lower edge of the lid, and then I can easily soften it. That's good, except for I say this part of the eye is much too far out. So let me just kind of go back to my sculpt mode, and with a huge grab brush, push this in, because it was out much too much. There we go, much better. Now you will find that moving it around, you need a large brush because there's not a lot of polygons to move. So, okay, and I'll go and I'll switch to my lower lids and I'll move those around too, again with my large grab brush. And I'll do sort of what I did before. I'm going to sort of push this out a little bit so I have some eyelids there. And you can see that little yellow dot means I'm hitting a vertex. So I can use that to know if I hear there's no actual information. But if I go there, I'm pulling out a vertex. You could always go to Alt X and see the actual X-ray. But, you know, like that, it's okay. Move this like that. You're going to see what we're going to do is we're actually going to blend this all together. Once everything is looking pretty good, it's all going to be attached together. But for now, it's much better to just keep it separate. And I see now this way, I just can switch to the different parts, move them around, and, you know, adjust it like that. Let's say that we like this. Move that down. Let's say that we like this. And now we're going to mix this whole thing together in a moment. Okay, so let's say we like this. Now we're going to basically blend this whole thing together. So how are we going to do this? Well, we're going to select this. We're going to select this. We're going to join them together, so Control J, and we can do that because they have the same modifiers on them. And now we're going to apply all of these modifiers. And to apply all the modifiers at the same time, we can just go up here and so it says Apply All and just click that. If I don't have this little panel here, I can just go to Object and do this. Convert Mesh. And there we go. All right, now that there's no more modifiers on this, I can click this and click this. Control J, go to my sculpt mode, and remesh this whole damn thing. R, and now I want to do it at quite a small voxel level, and I'm going to do it at 0.05 and Control R, and now it meshed it together, and you see now it's all connected. But the eyelids are still pretty slick. Smooth this with a very, very, very low smooth, like that. Because you don't want to lose this nice edge here. Now you don't want to screw around with this stuff too much, because then you'll lose the all the kind of sharpness of it. But of course you can sculpt it, and I would still use quite a large brush so I don't kind of make it all mushy. It's easy to make this thing look mushy now that if you screw around with it too much. Okay, let's concentrate now on the outer corner of the eye now that everything's kind of mushed together or moved together. So now I'm going to basically do a couple things. I'm going to make sure that this overlaps onto the skin here. So I'm going to go back to my clay brushes, which I put at 4, with pretty low strength. And I'm going to add some clay like that. Smooth it up a little bit, like that. See? So that I have that upper lid, which actually does overlap onto and it overlaps the lower lid, and it overlaps onto the side of the frontal bone here. And a very useful brush can be to use this flatten contrast and go basically and sort of use it to sand the planes like that, to crisp them up. Let's say I do a really strong one. I can use it to crisp up the planes so that they're more sharp, you see, like that. Now this is also very useful to use the stabilized stroke at quite a low level so that I'm basically sanding that whole edge. Now you don't want to go too crazy because it should be pretty good already, so you don't have to go too nuts. But it's useful for kind of re-crisping up things. Okay, let's do the tear duct. So first thing is the tear duct is going to basically bridge these things together by basically building it up slightly on the inside part here. We could use the clay brush. That's probably going to work pretty well just to get us some clay like that. And then I'll put the smooth brush quite strong for now, but small, so I can kind of blend these two sections together a little bit. There we go. So here's my clay brush, and then I'm using control with the clay brush to dig that out a little bit. And the clay brush is great for kind of adding form in kind of a careful way. And then once I have that added on, I can use other brushes to kind of finesse it a little bit. See, now I have sort of bridged this gap. I'm making a kind of a depression in there. And now I can kind of go back there, and I see I need a bit more right there. Smooth that a little bit. And I probably will need to remesh it so that this part isn't that kind of lousy. I switch to the regular draw brush, low strength, and now I can go in kind of get that defined. And before long, I'm going to zoom out so I can just see if what I'm doing actually is making any sense. Okay, so here I'm going to use, what I'm going to do is I'm going to mask off the whole top here, like that. Smooth it a little bit. And then I'm just going to use a big brush now and sort of push up the lid slightly. But the reason why I masked it off first is because I do want to use a large brush so I don't kind of distort things too much, and so that they stay smooth. And that's why I put the mask on, so I don't destroy the upper part. Okay. Okay, now I'm going to use the crease brush. Shift C. Crease brush, right, that one. And I'm going to use the stabilized stroke. If it's not ticked on, you tick it on. And I kept it at sort of a medium size. And what I'm going to do with that is redefine this, because this got a bit mushy, and I want to be sure that I have quite a deep line on that part of the eyelid. And I might even make it a bit stronger for the middle part. Crease brush is great for this type of thing. Here on the side, I might go to the this one, 2, which I have put as draw sharp, and just kind of emphasize that there. And, just whatever areas are there to see. Okay, inflate here. In the center part of the tear duct, there is the actual tear duct. So I'm going to inflate this, smoothing this a bit so it gets even, and then I'm going to inflate the actual tear duct itself. And you notice that I probably have to remesh this, so I just smoothed it a little bit. There you go. There's your sort of tear duct. And I can use my crease brush once again, Shift C, to emphasize the skin around the crease, around the tear duct, like that. Okay. And, I'll take my G and move this up a bit because this tear duct is massive. A couple more things. Once again, the crease brush. Usually there is a crease underneath there. But actually, okay, I'm going to take my crease brush and just do a little line there, and maybe there as well, just to kind of give that, and I'll smooth that a little bit. Okay, that's looking pretty good. Take my flatten contrast brush, and I'll just turn down the strength quite a bit. And just basically sand that part so it's not sticking out in that weird way. Okay, I will now just recut these parts here. Line project. Go like that. F. Chop that, and I will do the same thing there. Okay, let's draw some eyebrows. So eyebrows, I'm going to use the draw sharp brush for that, this one. And I'm shrinking down my mouse, and I'm going to be using control. And I will also put my stroke at a very, very slight stabilized stroke. To do this, I'm going to use quite a small brush, and I'm going to press control while using the draw sharp brush so that I get basically raised little lines. And it's kind of like, looks, you know, like you could imagine, obviously you could use this for something like raised scars and, you know, that kind of thing. And so the hair direction at this point in the middle part of the brow kind of arcs like that. It's not going to be the most detailed brow in the world, but we'll, you know, do something okay. So this kind of arced shape, and obviously look at your own brows. There's sort of a wave in the brows. And then they'll sort of curve a little bit like that direction. And then here, near the middle part of the brow, they're pointing more out like that. Whoops, that was terrible. And then on the top here, they start to go down like that. And some people have them very, very sloping down, meaning that this is really obviously going down. I have it quite obvious, and my dad and my daughter all have it where that this part here is kind of a triangular peak where the hairs are really clearly going down. And then over here, they're going up, 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 up. This is their moment. Gotta be golden. Okay, sorry, I have that song in my head. And I'm going to erase a little bit of this because this brow is gigantic. And you see there I have sort of a little bit of a brow. I'm going to erase that, and I'll probably redo that again. Add a couple hairs this way, a couple of hairs going like that. And a little nice little drawn on eyebrow. There we go. Okay, so that's like a decent base. I might actually now remesh it at the same resolution, just that now at least it's kind of remeshed. And maybe I'll just draw on a little bit more of these hairs just to give it a bit more relief. Obviously this is completely optional, but you know, you can do it if you want to. There we go. Okay, and now the last thing is the actual eyes. So let's figure out how to do eyes. So here's a good way. First of all, we have our eyes. As you see, I'm going to carve basically an iris into this eyeball. First thing I'm going to do is I look at this here. I think the eyes should actually be pointing a little bit more down. So I'm going to do RX and just, there we go, a little bit more down. Next thing is I'm going to go to face mode, and I'm going to select, well, I should go back to my selection thing here. I'm going to select this face here, and I'm going to press Control plus, which basically makes it larger. First of all, I want to just see, does that iris size make sense? Seems probably okay. Let's try it for now. What I might do is just make this here, press GG, make it a tiny bit bigger. All right, do the same. Sorry, go back here, select that and select that. And I'm going to just press E and extrude it back. And the deeper you go, the more dark eyes this person will have. So I'll kind of go like that. Then I'm going to go Control minus. And that leaves us with the pupil. And right away I can see this pupil is much too large. Pupils aren't that big in diameter. I'm going to select that and again press GG. Shrink that pupil down a little bit. Go back to face mode. Whoops. Select it and then extrude it back. E. Kind of extrude it quite back. Now you see something. There's all of this junk because that's the sculpture in back of it. So what we got to do is we got to get rid of some of this clay in the back because there's actually clay covering the hole. The pupil goes back deeper than this, but we got to carve this part out in the actual face sculpture. So let's click the face sculpture. You always have to do this. Click the face sculpture. Maybe make quite a bigger a brush, and I'm just going to go to inflate and press I. Whoops, I should have gone there. Press I, and then I'm going to press Control, and I'm basically going to get rid of all this junk. I could even go like this. I just go back into solo mode and basically just push more strength. Push all this back. Because now that you carved out the iris, don't go on your lids, just that. Now that you carved out the iris and the pupil, you actually need room for it so that it won't basically poke through. Is that okay? Let's see. Do we have it all taken care of? All right, let's see if I remove the eye sculpt. That's good. Okay, good. I have it all removed. Perfect. So let's go back to our actual eyes. Let's do, first of all, shade auto smooth so I don't have these terrible polygons. And one extra thing to do is to add a bevel modifier. I'm going to go to the this modifier tab, and I'm going to add a bevel modifier. And you're going to see it's going to look very weird at first, but I'm going to put it at 2 segments, and that's pretty good. You see that what happens is that now it smooths out this edge, and you see the shadows much better. So without, with, much better with the bevel modifier. And that's obviously what I did there. All right, that's a pretty good little piece of eye. And I hope this was useful for you. I learned a lot. I hope you did too. And next we're going to be doing a full head, and we're going to be using a lot of these techniques at the same time. So I hope you'd enjoy that.